Happy Sabbath, church family. Is that fair to say we are a church family, not just students and staff and townsfolk? We're church family, so can we act like it? Happy Sabbath, church family. Happy Sabbath. I'm glad to be here. Thank you guys for being here as well. I didn't know his name. He was just a friendly guy working in a kitchen making burritos to sell to students. Somehow or another, we started talking and became friends. That's when I learned his story. He had come from hard times. He was a veteran who had lost his wife and, due to an upbringing on the streets of LA, had a hard time maintaining long-term employment. After his wife's passing, he traveled the country, moving from one place to another, one job to another, trying to escape the pain of such a loss. Eventually, it brought him back to Southern California, but in a state of complete disorder. It was 2:30 a.m. Everywhere on campus was silent except the ER and the hospital. He'd found what he thought to be a quiet spot to rest for the night, but during their routine checks, campus security had found him, sleeping behind the dumpsters at East Campus. He'd found a box someone had thrown away and took it apart to lay on, so he wouldn't have to lay directly on the cold, dirty ground. Although the officer had no specific reason to aid this trespasser, he had pity on the man and encouraged him to go to the Axe building on the corner of Anderson and Barton Road, right up here up the street. The security officer shared that he might find people that would be able to help him. So with nowhere to go, he got up from behind the dumpsters and sat on the porch until someone arrived the next morning. The someone who arrived that morning provided an opportunity called the Jobs Program, which helped this homeless man start to get his footing again. It was just about 1 year from sleeping behind a dumpster to renting a room and having a full-time job. He reached his most stable and successful point about 1.5 years ago today. But unfortunately, due to circumstances and some life choices, he's homeless again. But this time, with a community encouraging him and working to get him back on his feet. What example does Jesus give us about how to interact with people like my friend? What cues are we given about what the kingdom of God looks like for those that are less fortunate than us? How do we interact as the haves in a world full of have-nots? Let's bow our head one more time. God, I would just ask that these words be of you and from you, and none whatsoever from me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being present. Please allow hearts to be open, that they would be willing to accept what you have to share with them tonight. We thank you in your name, amen. I have this belief that Jesus doesn't ask us to share the beauty of his gospel before we've earned the right to. Let me explain. When you think of times where Jesus interacted with the poor, the sick, and those in need, or when he would share a parable with him, did he ever say, "Tell them I love them, but then let them continue fending for themselves"? No, of course not. In nearly every situation, he fed, he healed, he walked and talked with them before ever asking those with him to tell others about him. In short, when Jesus interacted with the less fortunate, or those considered less fortunate by the culture's definition, he didn't walk past them. He walked with them. Luke 6, the text we're talking about tonight, is all about Jesus calling us to serve. To serve, as I will translate it tonight, the person outside of our gates. The person we don't like seeing, walking by, smelling, or being near for very long. We're at a point in these texts in Luke where we're told that Jesus had called his 12 and commissioned them to become disciples. So although they are around him, there's other people listening to him as well, and it's integral to understand the background of the audience he was speaking to in these texts we're talking about. As mentioned, there were the disciples that have been named as his specific 12, as well as other disciples. There are Jews from Judea and Jerusalem. There are also Gentiles from Tyre and Sidon. This is a mixed group of people, including many that may not have even believed in him or known who he was, but just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Verse 18 tells us that this group had gathered to come to hear him and to be cured of their ailments. Those disturbed by evil spirits were healed, and everyone was trying to touch him, for the power that came out of him and healed them all. So these people weren't walking into a synagogue setting, just awaiting a great sermon. They came to be healed. They came to be relieved of their troubled spirits. And what did Jesus do? Say, wait? No. It says in verse 19, and all the crowd sought to touch him, for the power came out of him and healed them all. He healed them all. They came to him because they needed, and he gave because they needed. There's a principle Jesus is exemplifying here. He always met people where they were at and met their immediate needs. And in turn, it is only when people see Christ living in us and the power of a transformed life that they will want or be willing to hear our message of hope, acceptance, unconditional love, and eternal salvation from Jesus. Jesus walked with them. We should too walk with them. Back to our discussion of helping the have-nots in our lives. This idea of poverty is simple, right? It's when you don't have something. Of course, we also know that poverty can be a bit relative, right? I'm referring to the truth that poverty is not created equal. We've all heard the phrase, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I've seen that when visiting Peru, when visiting parts of Mexico, watching documentaries about parts of Africa. And yes, it absolutely also exists here in the United States. But what we'll call poverty, they consider normal life. We often call poverty when you have to do without certain luxuries. They call poverty when you have no food for an extended period of time. It is a fair assumption to think that you, sitting here, listening to me right now, are possibly sitting next to someone who could be defined as homeless. They may not look like what your idea of homelessness is, but they are in fact without a home and possibly without basic necessities such as food or a proper place to sleep or bathe. The statistics in Loma Linda are as such. There are approximately 23,000 people that are residents. It is estimated that 13% of that number, or approximately 3,000 people, are living below the poverty level and in turn estimated to be homeless. 3,000 in Loma Linda. You don't see 3,000 people living on the streets driving to Stater Brothers, do you? So maybe, is it possible that some of those 3,000 are students that are barely living off loans enough to get through class, but then sleep in their car and eat when they can afford to? Could it be that they're blessed with opportunities like the Relive thrift store just down the road to have clothes so they don't look like what some would call stereotypically homeless? Do me a favor. As we move into discussing what Jesus says in Luke about helping these people, think about what these words mean for the potentially homeless person sitting next to you. Luke chapter 6, verse 30. Jesus starts out by stating, "Give to everyone who begs from you." The Greek word used for everyone in this sentence here is pas, which translates to individually, each, every, any, all, the whole group, everyone, all things, everything. It is all-encompassing. It doesn't say give to some or give to a group. It says give to every individual who begs from you. The next important word is begs. Begs in the text is translated as to ask, beg, call for, crave, desire, or require. So by extension, we could almost say that if we expand it to the original audience that would have heard it for the first time, they would have heard, give to every individual who craves or desires or asks or requires from you. Perhaps, though, you have a question of what it is, what some of the needs are of the homeless around here. In preparation for this message, and on the topic of giving to the poor for this series, I wanted to speak with people that were in the midst of this situation. So I posted on Facebook about a month ago asking for questions that people would like to ask a homeless person, but may not feel comfortable doing. I have a few relationships with homeless people. I've established that I care, that I love, that I desire nothing but success and blessings for them. So I asked them some of these questions proposed to me on Facebook by my online community. Some of the answers might surprise you. One of the questions was, what is it that you need the most? The veteran I referred to earlier responded, money is something that is a necessity to survive, at least in this area. But more than that, a place to lay my head and take a shower to help me continue working towards getting myself out of this situation. On the streets, it's all survival mode. You can't thrive on the streets. You can only survive. Just so we're clear, you may think a middle-aged veteran living on the streets is too far removed from you and me, right? Or what about this response provided by a friend of mine who graduated from a private Christian university 10 years ago, who now is a single mother living with her son in their car in the Pacific Northwest? Does this make it more real? This is you and me out there. Not just them, this is us. This is a single mother our age, a single mother with a college education and a degree. Here is her answer. I need support from the community I am in and some friends and on a consistent basis. I do really need money also. I'm not an addict of any kind, and I never have been. There seems to be a stigma with the homeless people needing money that they are addicts. I came from a hard home life and haven't felt supported very often and or loved. I need money and support and a place to live that I can manage on my own and I can grow from there. I also asked, how do you feel when you ask for money and you get food? The vet responded again, I've never asked for money, but have been grateful for the times people have given me food. I would also never ask, but people offering to get me a room for the night is always an incredible gift. If we were to ascribe Jesus' words to the situation now, knowing what one of the many homeless you walk by every day feel and need, would it look different? Would you still only offer your leftovers on your drive home from a restaurant? Would you still hesitate to offer a few dollars to the person asking outside Stater Brothers? Would you be willing to offer that person a hotel room to give them a break from the cold, hard ground for one night and allow them to take care of their hygiene and other needs in private and a warm space for one night? Continuing with our text in Luke, give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, don't demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. Oh man, this one's a toughie. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. That's pretty seriously heavy, isn't it? If you were on the street and in a position where you had to beg for your next meal, how would you want to be treated? Would you want someone to walk past or to walk with you? Another question I asked of my friend was, what have you observed about people as you see them every day? He responded, it's incredible to me how many people walk by other people who are struggling and don't stop or take a second look. They just pass by without caring. That's unbelievable to me. Please know, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone tonight. I don't know if you're one of the people who this man has seen walk by, but is it time that we open our eyes and not just wait to be asked, but give without request? Give because you see a person that you believe may be craving a meal or craving a shower or craving something other than another night of raw survival. Luke continues, if you love those who love you, what benefit is it that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from who you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Can you imagine if we lived that out? What would God's kingdom established here on earth look like if that was our daily walk? If it was to give, lend, and love without any expectation? What if I told you that even my homeless friend knows this? The question that was submitted on Facebook was, have you helped someone today? And I almost didn't want to ask it. This friend of mine has so little, to the point of some days going without food, without a bed, without stuff we would consider basic necessities. But I asked anyways. His reply, yes, I try to help someone every day and any time I can, in any way I can. Whether it's physically helping at the local thrift store or giving a kind word and bringing a smile to someone's face, I try to help people every day. I hardly have, and this is his words, a pot to piss in. But that doesn't mean we all don't have something to give. I've witnessed my friend share what little food he has with others. I've witnessed him take what little money he occasionally has and offer to get some hot food for someone even less fortunate than him at Staters. If he can do it, why don't we? Jesus did it. He did it when he fed the 5,000, didn't he? Didn't his disciples tell them the people had gathered were hungry? And what did he do? He fed them. He didn't preach about how they should go find food for themselves, did he? He didn't reprimand them about why they hadn't brought food or why were they even hungry? Why hadn't they prepared properly? No, he fed them. Luke 10:29-37, we read about the Good Samaritan, the story of a man who, while traveling down the Jericho road, was assaulted and robbed and then left for dead. We know the Jericho road was not a safe, well-lit area with security patrolling regularly. It was known to be a rough area, and yet it was where people had to travel between Jericho and Jerusalem. The parable continues that as the injured man was laying there, he had not one, but two of his clergymen turn up their noses towards him, not offering any help as they passed by. The two clergy, as the Bible calls them, a priest and a Levite, were well aware of the trouble on that road, and seeing a man who was injured from being attacked by thieves on his trip should have immediately been a sign that he was in desperate need of help. However, they just walked by. Although we can't read their minds, we know that their religious law prevented them from touching anyone unclean before entering the temple. But it is believed by some that they were on their way back from the temple and wouldn't have had to adhere to the strictness of staying clean versus being unclean by touching an injured man. And yet, they still just walked by. Finally, a person who was considered a mortal enemy, a Samaritan, considered to the clergy to be the lowest of the low, stopped, helped the injured man, making sure he was nursed back to health, giving him a real, tangible example of loving your enemy. The Samaritan walked with the injured man. As far as we can tell, he walked with him until he was well and back in good shape. But what does it mean in Luke where it tells us to fully love those in need of help? For the Samaritan, it meant putting his enemy in a hotel where he could recover, paying for his stay, and paying for the hotel manager to essentially take care of him, instructing the manager to do whatever it takes to help him get well, and the Samaritan would repay him in full. How do you respond to that? Are you maybe compelled to action? Perhaps it leaves you yearning to do more and express love? Or does it leave you content to just walk by? My veteran friend expressed this sentiment in a couple of his answers also. The question, what are you most proud of? His answer, feeling like I was of value and had made something of myself and was deserving of people's trust. And finding the Seventh-day Adventist Church and finding a family and band of brothers within it. Question 2, what is the one item you have that brings you the most happiness? His answer, friends and phone numbers I know I can call and the person on the other end will answer, listen, and legitimately care about me. Question 3, what do you really want? Not need, want. His answer, a companion to love again and have someone to lean on for me to care and give affection to. To have a family again is my deepest want. Question 4, how can I help? His answer, the next time someone comes up to you and asks you for something to eat, don't take no for an answer. Tell them you'll walk into the restaurant or store with them hand in hand, regardless of how they smell, how they look, or anything else. Then eat with them and treat them like a person you want to get to know and love, and not just someone that's available to donate a meal to. Are you seeing a recurring theme here? Are you hearing the cries of this person? What do they love? What do they want? Yes, they need their necessities taken care of, food, shelter, safety, but what else? He wants to be valued, just like you and I. He wants to be loved and feels blessed to have found a few friends who he knows he can count on. Someone on Facebook asked this question: are there ways in which you wish the church would treat you differently? What do you wish society knew about the homeless community? Are you ready for these answers? The veteran shared, we are so stereotyped, where it's assumed we all are mentally disabled, or that the homeless life is the one we choose, or that we gave up and we're too lazy to get out of the situation. It's just not true. Life happens. Poop happens. And you've got to fight to get out of it. Sometimes it takes longer than you'd think, and it's really hard to lose the label. And the young lady I mentioned earlier, her answer: some churches are better at treating poor people than others. I think lessons in compassion and treating people with value and non-judgment is always a good thing to teach. I wish our churches realized that you cannot give what you don't have, and most homeless people who don't have much don't know how to love themselves very well. The church must give love and support and affection in order for people to know they are these things. Does hearing these answers change your perception of what we're called to do in this kingdom Jesus came to introduce and be the first example of? This goes far beyond food, but on some level, certain necessities must be met to express our love before we can talk about the love we have to share. This idea prompted me to think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're going to put it up on the screen behind me. For those that might not recall Maslow's theory of hierarchy, it's set up like this. You have your triangle, and at the very bottom, it begins with physiological needs, such as the need to breathe, have food, water for sustenance, get proper sleep, and the ability to clean and relieve oneself. The level above it is safety, which involves the security of your body, employment, resources, a family, your health, property. The third step is love and belonging, which includes one's friendships, family relationships, and sexual intimacy. Second to the top of the triangle is esteem, which includes self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, respect by others. Finally, the very top of the triangle is self-actualization, which includes creativity, problem-solving, spontaneity, lack of prejudice, acceptance of facts. So if we look at Maslow's example of what it takes to be a complete and self-actualized person, how can we sometimes ask questions of the homeless like, why don't you just make better decisions to get yourself out of this problem? When at times they have nothing to eat and nowhere to sleep. How can we expect a person with so little to go from not having their physiological needs taken care of to being self-actualized? We can't. I know it's a crazy scenario to consider, but if your best friend knew you slept behind a dumpster night after night, constantly berated you asking, why don't you just stop being homeless, and only occasionally offered you change or leftover food, would they really be your best friend? Heck, would they be a friend at all? No, of course not. Rather, if your best friend knew you were in a situation of need, they would reach out to help you. They would do everything in their power to help you out of the situation. Right? Likewise, this text in Luke, I believe, is also telling us to love truly and give without needing anything in return. Maybe to make it easy, reconsider Maslow's hierarchy for a second. The first level, physiological. Second level, safety. Third level, love and belonging. What level are you willing to help someone achieve? And yet, how often do we only give 1/8 of the first level to those we run into during our daily lives who are part of the have-nots? Leftovers after dinner aren't bad, but they're barely the beginning of what's next and what is really, truly needed. So what can you and I tangibly do? What is the opportunity you have, possibly as a student who is tight on funds, doesn't have extra space in the room, and honestly probably shouldn't just invite the homeless in to live with you right off the bat, and maybe is a little nervous about just being alone with some new person you've met while at a grocery store parking lot? That's okay. Truly, you can't go from sharing leftovers one evening to running a full-fledged homeless shelter the next night. Nor can you go through life feeling guilty about your natural fears. However, you can still give and be present. You can volunteer time at UReach through the University Church. You can participate in their jobs program, mentoring someone who is working towards getting off the streets. You can volunteer time at Helping Hands Pantry, who provides food weekly to over 7,000 people in need. These opportunities will allow you to interact with this group of have-nots, build open relationships with them, and maybe, just maybe, profoundly help them turn their lives around. All because you were willing to give what little you had. This is imperative because if you can make time now in your busy student schedule, in your busy life, maybe when you leave Loma Linda, no matter where you end up for residency or for your job after graduation, you will have instilled the importance of being involved, of serving those that have not, and of being the tangible hands of Jesus everywhere you go. You will be walking with, not walking past. And then, instead of stepping over these people that you come into contact with on the street, consider the questions my homeless friend has for you. What is your definition of homeless? Is it worth reconsidering what you think of those you walk by in need? If you have, and we don't, why don't you give of what little you do have? Even if it's just time volunteering at Helping Hands or at a church outreach program. Or what if you went through your home or room and take time to decide if everything around you is stuff you really need? And consider a few times a year donating to somewhere like Relive Thrift, which provides clothes, food vouchers, and more to those that come requesting help. My veteran friend had one last piece of advice. When you're walking down the street and you pass a homeless person, give a few words of gentleness and care. Even just a, please, I know that I'm praying for you. And then give to them the respect and love you'd give to anyone that was in your family, in whatever way you'd translate that idea. I don't know about you, but that sure sounds like what Jesus called us to do, to fully live in his kingdom. I have 2 additional questions I'd like you to consider as you leave tonight. 1, are you willing to take the steps necessary to truly live this out, to give those you interact with dignity, patience, time, and true love? And then tonight, will you commit to working towards being a kingdom dweller who will always walk with and not just walk past those in need? Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, I firmly believe that you have put each one of us here at this place and time for a very specific purpose. And I would just ask, as we've talked tonight about what you have called us to do for those that are considered the have-nots, that you would resonate in our hearts this idea of loving and giving just because a need is seen, not because it's asked for. God, we thank you for this time of worship. I thank you for all those that have taken time to come here and spend time with you in community. We love you and thank you for this opportunity. In your precious name, amen.